How to discover what everyone else is missing. Normally, when you study a certain discourse or read a text, you will do it in a chronological way from top to bottom. And it's going to be quite hard to get original insights, whether you're in Google search results or in your ChatGPT. That's where knowledge graphs can be very helpful because they can visualize all the main topics in your text as a graph, show you the main topics inside, how they relate to one another, and also allow you to reveal hidden clusters of ideas that are otherwise not visible. So you can focus your attention on your LLM's attention on the topics that are less represented in the general discourse, and this way generate truly original and interesting insights. You can also use the graph to identify the structural gaps in the discourse. And when you try to bridge these gaps, this is where you will generate really interesting ideas because you will address the blind spots in this discourse. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use InfraNodus, a visual text analysis tool that uses knowledge graphs in order to generate insights. If you would like to try this approach, you can do this on infranodus.com, the tool that I developed for visual text analysis and insight generation. And the best thing is that it also works through MCP server, so you can plug it into your favorite LLM like ChatGPT or Claude and use it there if you don't want to use the visual interface. This video is going to be a tutorial for beginners where I will demonstrate all the main workflows. So if you never used InfraNodus or if you're already an InfraNodus user and you would like to get a general introduction into how this tool works, then this video is for you. Even if you use InfraNodus through the MCP server, it's going to be useful because you will understand how it works under the hood, because I'm going to be using the graph for the demonstration. All right, so let's dive in. The first thing that you need to do when you want to analyze a text with InfraNodus is to import that text and visualize it as a graph. You can do that in the app section here, and in this text field you can input whatever it is that you want to analyze. You can copy and paste a text, upload a file. In this case, I'm going to use Google search results because this is great for demonstration. You can use it for a topic you're interested in. So I'm going to type in AI tools for productivity 2026, and then I'm going to click Google, and here I choose Google application. So that means you can import the results from Google, and we will create a new graph with a new name and click visualize. And what's going to happen here is that InfraNodus will visualize search results for AI productivity tools from Google. It will list the search results on the left. You can also see them here if you click on show content. And the graph is the visualization of the main topical clusters that are found in these results. And so the first step that you need to do when you use InfraNodus is just to use the graph to get a general overview of the main topics. In fact, you also have the insight panel here that gives you a summary of the graph, so you can also use this insight panel. But I also recommend you just to use the graph and to take a look at it and see what it's about. So you will see that when we search for AI productivity tools, the main topics that come up are text generation, productivity boost here. We can click on them and see what are the different words that I used in them, freelancer ranking, task management, meeting workflow, and so on, right? So we get the gist of what the results are about, what is offered out there on the market in Google search results for the topic of AI productivity tools. And that's already very interesting insight because it gives you an idea of what exists out there, what this discourse is about. The bigger the cluster is, the more influence it has. So when we click on that cluster, we can see that it has 12% of influence. Unlike, for example, this cluster here, voice dictation, which has only 3% of influence. So we understand that there is much more results on productivity boost and developer tools than there are on voice dictation, for example, when we talk about AI productivity. So this also gives us information and insight about the relative influence of these topics. Also, the thicker are the connections, the better those clusters are connected. So for example, here you see we have a meeting workflow, freelancer, ranking, and productivity boosts are very well connected. So that means that a lot of information out there is for freelancers. It's about productivity boosts, different workflows, and also meeting workflows, right? So how you can manage your meetings, and also you have this cluster on task management as well. So as you can see, these are the main clusters, and you get a sort of like a general overview of all these different search results. By the way, if you had to get this same level of understanding through Google, you would have to manually look through all the different pages of search results or read very long reviews on ChatGPT, but you wouldn't get to this level of understanding of the connections between the different topics, of the relations between them. And this is Why it's so important? Because you're seeing the meridians of how meaning circulates in this discourse. The next step when we're on the topical view here in the analytics panel is to look at the clusters which are highlighted with this dotted line here. So when you hover over these slightly highlighted clusters, you will see that actually they're connected with this moving dotted line. And that means that these are the clusters you should point your attention to if you want to develop this discourse further. In fact, this approach is based on how this discourse is structured. For example, here we can see that the structure of the discourse is diversified. That means that influence in this discourse is distributed more or less equally between different topics. There is not one topic or concept that overtakes all attention and influence. So in that case, if we want to develop this discourse further, we want to focus on these well-represented topics, but also add something that's a bit less represented in order to help this discourse evolve, right? So this is where we start finding what everyone else is missing, because on the surface this discourse is about freelancer ranking and productivity boost, but actually if we look a little bit closer, we will see that there are smaller clusters that are underrepresented that could be interesting actually, and it could be very interesting for us to connect them to the main clusters, because then we would be able to create discourse that develops those underrepresented ideas. So in order to do that, we can hover over these less represented clusters and then click this button here. And for the beginning, we can just click highlight to select them. So we have here voice dictation, productivity boost, and freelancer ranking. And what I like to do first is just to recommend people to think about the possible connections that these ideas might have, right? So you don't need to use AI at this point to understand that, for instance, there is a lack of materials online on the tools for voice dictation for freelancers. So there is already some material, there's demand for it, but there's maybe not enough. So that's also an indication of an opportunity for us, because if we create content or tools that can be used for voice dictation by freelancers for productivity boost, then perhaps we will cater to something that is important in the context of this discourse. So that's the first insight that you can get. And if you cannot make the connection yourself, you can always click here and then choose AI mode here. I like to use question just to motivate my thinking first, and then InfraNodus will automatically open the AI Insights panel that will show you a question that is generated based on the clusters that you selected, this triangle here, and then it will propose you to think in the direction of how you can develop it further. So, for example, here it says, how does integrating ChatGPT-based productivity assistance with locally running live voice detection platforms reshape tested freelancer ranking of real work performance, schedule behavior in Google Calendar, and perceived purpose-specific productivity gains? So it's basically about integrating voice dictation and productivity tools. And then if we would like to explore how we can generate an interesting idea from it, we can simply send this question back to AI and ask it to elaborate further on it so that it generates content that would link these clusters together. And then if we add it in the graph, then it's going to connect these topics better and help us develop this discourse. It might help us come up with an interesting idea. It might also tell us something that we might have missed earlier. So that is very interesting, because this will allow us to understand how we can develop these topics further and come up with very interesting questions and insights. So this is how you would use this topical overview. The next step is to zoom in and to look at the concepts. So this is a high-level overview of the main ideas. If you click on the concepts, this is like zooming in onto more detailed representation of this discourse, where we can see more details. And you can use it in the same way as topics. First, you look at the main bigger concepts like ChatGPT, workflow, category, chatbot, and you understand that, okay, the discourse is mainly circling around ChatGPT and workflows for AI, also different tools like Notion, Copilot, Claude, and so on, tools for business, automation, including Zapier. So that gives you a general idea of the discourse. But here again, you have information about the main relations. So for example, meeting transcription is one. And that means that there is quite a few results on meeting transcriptions. And this is also a very interesting cluster to explore. And then when you scroll to conceptual gateways, these are the nodes that are less represented, but that are quite important to this discourse, because they can allow you to connect this text to the outside world or to enter into this discourse with the interesting ideas. So when you hover over these highlighted nodes like you have here, you see there's a little halo around automation, then this button here. Then if you click highlight, you will actually select these conceptual gateways here. So they're visualized here, right? And then you can see that it's about chatbot, free, automation, live, motion. Okay, so also there is this little cluster on test, rank, and freelancer. So some kind of idea about chatbots automating and for freelancers. Okay, so if we cannot come up with an idea ourselves, once we selected this, we can actually also use the AI module here, either here using this button, or you also have the same module here, question selected. So then it's going to question all these selected nodes and generate an interesting question that could somehow connect them together and develop these important but less represented concepts a little bit better. So for example, here it says how the free live automation tools like motion integrated chatbots reshape freelancer test-based ranking systems by shifting evaluation from isolated task performance to continuous workflow orchestration. So really pointing our attention that it's not so much about automation, it's about workflow orchestration. And this is kind of like where the future of these tools lie, operating them on higher level, where you don't just automate process by process, but rather you orchestrate different workflows that you have in your business. And this is talking about freelancers. So how can individuals use it in their work? And again, if we like the question, we can send it to AI, and then the built-in AI will try to elaborate on this question and respond to it in an interesting way, connecting these ideas better, and then giving us some nice ideas for how we can develop this discourse further, or maybe a product idea based on these search results. So this is how you analyze the concepts. Then the next step is to analyze the gaps. The gaps in the discourse are the topics that are not so well connected, that we could benefit from connecting much better. And for example, here we have a gap between voice dictation and productivity boost. That means that these two topics are represented in this discourse, but they're not very well connected. There's a blind spot between them. So this discourse could benefit from us bridging this gap. And we can do that by clicking on this button here. It will automatically generate an interesting insight question, and then we use the same workflow. Or we can also go here, AI question, and we can directly go into the idea mode or summary. So depending on your workflow, you might want to be generating questions and then answering these questions yourself or using the AI, or you might be wanting to generate ideas directly. So this depends on your outcomes and objectives. But here it basically going to come up with some nice ideas. I already see just from the graph that there is a lack about voice dictation tools. So this could be a real market opportunity here, creating productivity tools for voice dictation for freelancers. We actually saw it here also when we highlighted these clusters. You see voice dictation, freelancer ranking, and productivity boost. So there was something about maybe voice dictation tools for freelancers that we could explore. And the gaps are telling us the same thing, just a little bit more specifically the relation between voice and productivity. And then we can reload the gaps and find some other interesting gaps. For instance, voting lists and voice dictation, or research automation and voting lists, or text generation and developer tools. That could be actually quite interesting because we have a lot of tools that are made for coding, but also text generation, maybe for search engine optimization. So this could be another really interesting gap to explore. And this is also how you find these missing ideas that would be quite difficult to discover if you just read the text from top to bottom, or if you looked at AI responses, because eventually what you're doing here is that you're using the graph to focus on gaps and on underrepresented ideas. In fact, we have a whole article on InfraNodus main website right here. If you go to infranodus.com and then you go to product, you can read more about cognitive diversity. That explains how this measure of cognitive diversity works and how InfraNodus is steering you towards optimizing the structure of your thinking. If you would like a more esoteric article, there's another one that's called Thought Acupuncture that is using the analogy of acupuncture to explain the approach that is used in InfraNodus. So if you go back here, in fact, that's what it's doing. It's trying to help your attention to focus on underrepresented topics, on underrepresented ideas, on blind spots, on gaps. And then this is where you're actually using the graph to stimulate your imagination and your creative thinking. And then you can use AI to help you generate questions or ready-made ideas that you can then integrate in your research, texts, or product ideas. So this is how it would work. When you come up with an interesting idea, you can save it into your project notes. So InfraNodus has this section called project notes, where you can write your ideas here. So this is where it can be found here. Or if you generated something using AI, you can actually select a part of this text and then use this button here that is just next to the selection to save it into your project notes as well. Or also this button here to save the whole note, and then you will see that it appears here and it's automatically saved. And then you can store all the most important and interesting ideas in your project notes this way. So this is a very good workflow to have. And finally, if you would like to import more data, you can simply click here, import, and then choose the same import source or another import source and add more data. But I recommend to create a separate graph for each import source. Even if you have, let's say, several PDF documents, I would rather import each document one by one if I have time to research them and study them separately. And then you can combine them later using the compare to feature where you can merge different graphs. This I'm going to explain in another video. So this is it in a nutshell. I just wanted to show you the general workflow that you can use to analyze text, to generate insights, and to save your ideas. It is also available in this workflow here on the right. If you click at the top right button, you will see a full list of all the steps that we just completed, and you can follow them step by step or just watching or reading this tutorial. One last thing I wanted to show you is that, in fact, when we are on the concepts view, you can see here that some nodes are hidden. That is because if we actually showed all the original nodes that were in the graph, there would be too much attention on the search queries that we used. So this is what InfraNodus automatically does, and this is how you can also clean your results by selecting the overrepresented nodes, like in this case, for example, AI tool, and then you remove them. Then you see, for example, productivity is too big because this is the search result. So in every search result, you will have AI productivity tools, and this might pollute your data. So you remove this word as well, right? And then gradually you will come to the structure that is more or less diversified. That means there are different distinct topics, and you can start analyzing the discourse this way. If you would like to go further, you can actually use this button here that reveals underlying ideas. So you click on this button and it will automatically remove these top nodes that you can see here. So for example, there's quite a few results on ChatGPT workflows. There is also top Zapier. So we can simply delete them all automatically. And then more interesting underlying results are going to come out. And so we can click this button several times to reveal underlying ideas in order to dig deeper and to slice off the top layer of ideas in order to get to the more latent and interesting topics that are maybe hiding underneath. They will get much more precise and much more specific. So this is also quite interesting because you can discover new ideas this way. Once you perform the first analysis, then you can go to concepts, remove the top layer of the most represented ideas, hide them one by one or automatically using this button here, and gradually you will uncover deeper and deeper layer of meanings and topics that you can analyze using the same procedure that we use at the very beginning. So this is how you can use InfraNodus. I hope you find this introduction helpful. Let me know if you understood everything, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments to this video below. I will be happy to answer them. And if you would like to try it out, go to infranodus.com. Thank you.